Okay, today I thought I'd have a bit of a ramble about Dr. John. Dr. John, the New Orleans musician, aka Mac Rebennack. Interesting guy, very talented musician. Yeah, he's just musically quite interesting. And I mean, I went into this, I was just sort of thought, well, I'll have a look at Dr. John's stuff, I'll see what I can find, pertaining to, red flags and such forth. As you'd expect, I mean, there's a lot of the sort of usual stuff, but actually, in a weird way, not quite as much as I thought there might be in terms of his artwork. Now, Dr. John, there's just quite a lot there, so let's just get into it. I mean, Dr. John, he's a New Orleans native. He got into music. I mean, he was a bit of a musical prodigy, I think, of sorts, anyway, and he was in and around the music scene. His father ran an electrical shop which supplied a lot of places, so I think he got his way in via this. And he was a talented guitarist and a talented songwriter. I mean, I think he was in the Musicians Union, age 16? So, I mean, he clearly was talented, and he kind of, well, in a lot of ways, he's kind of like the first wigger in the music industry. I mean, there's probably a few people you could apply that label to, but Dr. John really was. I mean, he spoke in all the patter and everything. I mean, I'll say this is New Orleans. Well, fair enough. New Orleans is quite a distinct city in America. I mean, it's an interesting place. I've never been there. I've been to America at all, but still, it is an interesting place culturally and historically. Obviously, it was founded by the French. I think the Spanish ruled it for a time as well, and obviously with its proximity to the Caribbean, it has a certain flavour which is distinct from other southern cities. It became part of America, obviously, after the Louisiana Purchase. But I mean, by that time, I think a certain strand of the culture had kind of cemented a little bit. And I mean, this is kind of interesting in itself as a distinction between French and Anglo rule, is that the French, they were more, and the Portuguese and all that they were a little bit less based, in all honesty. So there was a lot more Creoles, and the Creoles were kind of a bit like, I mean, an administrative class. I don't know if that's quite right, but certainly the Creole influence, in large part, is where jazz comes from. I mean, Jelly Roll Morton, who's a fantastic individual. Well, I don't know if he was a fantastic individual, but he's certainly a fantastic musician and a very interesting guy. Jelly Roll Morton, piano player, trailblazer. Yeah, it's just fascinating character. He was a Creole, and he talked at length about the birth of jazz. And, it was this brew, because, I mean, jazz essentially, it did kind of, if it came from anywhere, it came from New Orleans. Obviously, it came from all these different roots. And Jelly Roll talked about that at length, and he was quite open. That he said, like, a lot of it comes from the classical music and it comes from the opera, and it would be the Creoles who would go to the opera because they had a slightly sort of higher caste, as it were. And a lot of them, especially if they were relatively successful, as his family were, he was a Creole. He never tired of telling people that. Like, they would go there. They would educate their children in the piano, and they would give them piano lessons and all this kind of stuff. So this kind of New Orleans jazz, it was a bit more of a brew in a lot of ways. And this Creole culture sort of spawned, well, its own style. And then you have got this more kind of African root as well, which is very strong in New Orleans. And I mean, I remember reading, I think the French, they permitted the slaves to play drums. This is during the sort of slavery years, obviously. They permitted them to play drums on a Sunday. So every Sunday there'd be a sort of a day off, and they would all go to some, I don't know, place, field or whatever, and they'd play the drums, and it would be this thing. So that kind of kept its root. Now, I don't think that was permitted under sort of British rule. And I think, I'm doing this from memory, I think it was because that they were concerned that there was some sort of communications going on with the drumming or something like that. Well, anyway, the French weren't worried about that, and what allegedly arose from that is that this root wasn't broken. I don't know how much validity there is to that. I just think it's proximity to the Caribbean. Probably a lot of people came from places like Haiti and, you know, Jamaica and all these other places. So there is a sort of lilt in the music. It is almost a calypso thing. It's something with the offbeat and off the second beat and stuff. And it is quite distinct and it is quite interesting. Anyway, Dr. John came from all that, and he essentially was working as a songwriter very young, and he was a session musician in and around Cosimo Matasso's studio. Cosimo Matasso, you probably might have guessed, was an Italian-American, and he ran a very influential, name escapes me, is it Ace, something like that, record label in New Orleans. And also Alan Toussaint, he was around there as well. I mean, probably we'll get to him later. He's another interesting character. A very talented arranger, very talented producer, songwriter. Probably a Freemason. They're all Freemasons, what would you expect? I mean, actually, that probably should be expanded on a little bit, because there is a specifically Masonic route, I think, to New Orleans. And I think the Masonic lodges and orders, when they go on the Mardi Gras, they would all sort of turn up. So this is kind of shop window Freemasonry. And I think this is very prevalent. I mean, Louis Armstrong was a Freemason. I don't really know that I think these are probably just like local gentlemen's drinking clubs kind of thing. But, you know, there is that, the framework is there. So, I mean, you know, this is, where does the sort of conspiracy like begin and end? I don't know. But anyway, there is a lot of masonry there, and the reason why I mentioned Alan Toussaint there is he's great pals with Elvis Costello. Say no more. Elvis Costello is an absolute Freemason. Doesn't really need to be said. I don't know if there's many people who are so keen on the old Masonic imagery in their sort of work and posing as Elvis Costello. He didn't want to go to Chelsea Hotel, you know, and he hasn't. So fair play. Anyway, and it's probably just worth briefly expanding on this. I mean, this is stuff I've talked about elsewhere, but it's like with all these images, when you see them, I think people can get a little bit carried away with them. The way I see it, it's just like, it is what it is. Like, the music industry is essentially a Masonic guild. So if you want to be in that guild, or if you want to be in the industry, you have to join the guild. And you have to pay your dues. And I just think a lot of these photographs and doing the eyes and the hands and all this stuff, this is just the way to pay the dues, essentially. Now, some people then, they get into the guild and they like the guild and they want to progress in the guild. And this would be certain figures, Costello being one of them. I'm unconvinced that someone like Dr. John is, but then again, he was massively into fucking the occult and voodoo. Well, I say massively, perhaps that's overselling it. It certainly was a part of his life, it would seem, and I think that went beyond just sort of his image, because it was his image as well. So there is that. You do have to sort of, you know, balance these things and say, well, he was, you know, the gree gumbo jumbo or whatever he called himself. So there is an element of sort of theatricalism. Not the right word, theatricality even, to it all. But at the same time, it is a Masonic guild, so it's just like, when people get like really kind of carried away, oh my god, look, he's done the high sign, it's just like, yeah, because he's bending the knee to the power structure which is in the music industry, which controls it. You don't get anywhere really unless you're going to do that, at least here and there. Now, I just think some people, there are just, you know, there are degrees, no pun intended, to that. Some people love it. It kind of becomes their thing and they get into it. Other people just get used to it and they just pose for a photograph here and there. You know. So anyway, I think that is worth mentioning. This is just what it is. It is a Masonic guild, the music industry. And I'm sure, well, I mean, Hollywood, there seems to be some connection to these scenes, isn't there? But anyway, I just sort of tag that in. So there is a lot of masonry there. I don't know about Dr. John. I mean, it probably is worth mentioning here, and I wouldn't really read much into this at all. He did attend a Jesuit high school, but a lot of people did, and he was a Catholic. He was from a Catholic background anyway, and there's some people who attend Jesuit schools who I'm very suspicious about and will be the subject of an upcoming video. In this instance, I think this is just the nature of New Orleans. I mean, I don't think he was tasked at this point, we will use him and he will be a wigger. That's nonsense, I think. It's just what he was. He was also very keen on heroin from an early age. It's a bit of a poor decision he made there, and I mean that blighted his life really. I don't want to skip too far ahead here, but he received a life-changing injury, I suppose. He had an altercation in a club, and he had part of his left finger shot off with a pistol, and that curtailed his piano playing. Sorry, I beg your pardon, his guitar playing. I think it was his third finger, and I think this is a finger you do a lot of bending on. So it kind of, for a session musician and a guitar, I mean that's pretty traumatic. But he then moved to the piano. I mean, obviously he played the piano before, but he focused on the piano, and that's obviously where he's made his name since. I don't want to skip too far ahead here, but basically, well, he did time. I mean, that's worth mentioning. Oh, I should say as well, I read his book years ago, and annoyingly, it's not available on Kindle. If it were available on Kindle for a reasonable price, I probably would buy it just to, do a really sort of more in-depth assessment here. I mean, I can give you a precis of it as I recall it, and it's a good book. But I mean, I read this probably the best part of 20 years ago. It's under a voodoo moon, under a something moon anyway, and it's just this sort of dope fiend kind of account of his musical life and stuff. And I mean, it's kind of, I don't know, it's grotty really. In hindsight, you look back and you just think this guy's just it's just grim. But I mean, it had a certain kind. I think he played this up that he's this kind of like hipster, as in the original 1950s hipster dope fiend kind of character. I mean, I remember him talking at one point. He had money. He had this he was trying to be a pimp and stuff, and he had money invested in a backstreet abortionist. And it's just like he talks about how he would take the remains, as it were, in a bag and throw them in the river. I mean, stuff like that. He's just like, fucking hell. And I think that's just him, sort of like, hey, yeah, I'm bad motherfucker kind of shit. In his head, he's kind of impressed by that and how dark it is. But you can't also get too far away from the fact that he was a complete smackhead. And he did do, and he was an occultist as well, to some extent. Now, I'm not necessarily connected. I think he just literally had money in this operation. I don't think this is anything beyond that. But he did time in the early to mid 60s for heroin possession. And he was sent to 5 years in prison in California, to which he served 2. And as I recall from the book, he didn't have a very good time there. I mean, I don't suppose many people do have a good time in California prisons, or any prisons for that matter, in the 1960s, or any time subsequent really. But still, the bit I recall from that book is he thought that all the New Orleans guys in there would all kind of have each other's back, and that he would kind of have like a sort of crew that he could kind of seamlessly drift into, and that wasn't the case. And I think he was quite disappointed to find that.